Been there, done that. Yeah.
Here you go, bud. All right. If I kick you under the table, you have to kick Randy. Okay. Okay. Welcome to everyone here from for the school board to Poquoson City Council. Appreciate y'all's time this evening. Appreciate everybody that may be watching from home. We're here to talk about our budgets. First work session is a joint session with school board, talk about their budget, which seemingly at a high level appears to be very well done, and the city's very happy to get the results of that. And then we'll carry on as city council only and talk about our budget. But with that, Gary, you got anything you want to say as we kick this off?
No, sir.
Okay. All right. So Randy, you want to talk about how you've incorporated, and then you can talk about what your budget consists of.
I would be pleased to, sir. As council members will recall from the last work session, I mentioned that this is a unique occurrence in my career. So in the almost 30 years, and I think this is budget number 30, this is the only time that school division has not asked for more local money to support its operation and budget. You know, we're all hoping that there would be more state funding coming and the ADM, average daily membership, would turn, and we're in that year. So this is not a trend. It's, but it is a one-time happy occurrence that that coincides with an otherwise very constrained budget of ours. So the little that we've been able to do inside our budget, particularly for compensation, was made possible in large measure because of the unique circumstances the schools find themselves in. As everyone knows, while the operating budget local support has not increased, certainly a significant feature of this budget is capital support of the schools, and we're all aware of that. And with that, the superintendent, I think, has a few slides to review the highlights of the school board's adopted budget.
Thank you. And I know that many of you, if not all of you, may have seen me do this presentation or seen it online, so I'll move through it pretty quickly. But for those who might... Oh, thanks. I forgot. For those that might be at home, if you've not seen it, this will give you just a quick overview of the school budget as it was prepared this year. I do want to highlight here that we had the three priorities. One was to include additional full-time equivalents in terms of teaching positions. As you'll see momentarily, our enrollment's projected to go up. So with enrollment going up, we now need more teachers in our schools, especially in light of the fact that we cut so many of our FTEs, I believe 56 through the last almost 10 years now. And we've had some specific need for teachers who work with our students with disabilities. We also want to increase compensation for all employees, and we wanted to complete the third and final year of the transition to the new teacher pay plan. As you well remember, we did do a study 2 years ago and then began our move to a new pay plan, which is truly a step plan, which will help make us more competitive with our surrounding school divisions. So I'm happy to say at the end of the budget work, we accomplished all of those priorities. Enrollment projections, and I've talked about this in a variety of meetings, especially as we talked about consolidation and now as we move into the budget. But you see here, again, the number of students we lost since 2006 through 16, through that period. But then moving into this year, we saw our first increase since 2006, which increased 59 students. That did include preschool numbers. And then we are projecting an increase of 36 students moving into next year, and we're basing that on the information we got from the Weldon Cooper Center, who does all the demographics for the state, and looking at our kindergarten registration to see if we believe that we will be able to match the Weldon Cooper Center projection, which we do believe we will. So what does that mean for us? As you can see here, the first big number up here is the enrollment increase. So as you know, in the years when we were losing enrollment, we were losing funding for the enrollment on top of the reductions in fundings that the state was doing as part of the work they did. So you see here we get almost $500,000 more with that projection of the additional 36 students. This was the year for re-benchmarking, which is when the state looks at what they would declare to be the true cost of education and what they should be providing. I do need everybody to understand, though, that re-benchmarking has been done based on the funding that's available now from the state. It's not the funding pre-recession, so it doesn't incorporate all of that funding that they cut because they haven't put it back in the budget. So I would argue it might not be truly a reflection of the cost of education. And then we did see a decrease in funding for the VRS rates because our rate actually went down. I know for the city side, that was a little different story, and then a slight increase in lottery. So you see here a net projection of over $608,000. Now, here's where you see cost increases, but mostly what you see here are decreases. We went out to bid for our health insurance. So you can see here that by doing that, and we also changed our dental insurance, that we actually saved ourselves almost $136,000. Again, that decrease in the VRS rate saved us $74,000, and then also, in addition to that, the $3,500. We do have some cost increases. Our support or our work with New Horizons Regional Center, we are seeing an increase that is primarily tied to an increase of students with disabilities. And then also, as we see in our homes, we see some increase in contracts and utilities. So again, something you haven't seen, at least since I've been here as superintendent, is you see a decrease when you're looking at our costs and our decrease of over $76,000. So this means that our increase for our budget was over $684,000 from the state. So here's what we've included back into the budget. As I mentioned earlier, we wanted to increase our teacher FTEs. We're going to have to continue to do that as enrollment increases, and that does come at a cost to the school division. So it will continue to be challenging, but that comes at a cost of over $208,000. The next 4 items, textbooks through curriculum writing, is us trying to get some of that back in the budget. You might remember every year we came with a cut in those areas, and they were small numbers, but when you put those together over a period of 10 years, it becomes a much larger number. So we're putting in a small amount there, and we'll continue to build that. And security equipment, many of you are well aware that we've put in a lot of additional cameras in our schools thanks to the state security grant funding, but we also now need to continue to cover the cost of the software update. So you see that on here too. So we're adding here over $246,000. And then compensation increase. So what you see here, the average teacher increase is 3.51%. It's because we're applying a 2% raise to the teacher scale, and we're moving them to the 3rd year of the transition. So they're moving up a step and getting that 2% raise. So the minimum a teacher is getting for us is 2%. But it comes out to an average for our teachers of 3.51%. As you well know, we are trying to be competitive with our competition on the peninsula. They do continue, as you probably see in the paper, to increase their raises, but we are trying to do the best we can for our teachers. And then all other employees who are not teachers will receive a 2% compensation increase. So this is how we got down to the budget shortfall of $0. I had hoped in my tenure here that I would actually see a year where we didn't have a budget shortfall, and finally it's come in year 10. But you can see here how we accomplished that. And that is the reason that we did not come forward to you asking for additional funding, because we were able to meet our 3 priorities by doing it with the state funding that we received. And as Mr. Wheeler mentioned, we know this is a year when you've really focused on the capital improvement plan and the funding needed to support that. So we still are unsure of our state funding. As you know, a special session started on April 11th. We are certainly hoping they'll be done with that as soon as possible. Because once they're done, we likely will have to make adjustments. We're remaining optimistic that we won't see reductions in state funding, and maybe we'd see a slight increase. As soon as we know, we'll certainly let you know. Again, I stress that we really need them to finish this work because we need to hold contracts until we know we have a budget approved through the state. So hopefully we'll hear from them by the end of this month, or certainly by sometime in May. I still say, again, those cuts that were made, those reductions beyond our loss of enrollment have not been refunded back in our budget. So I say the state hasn't fully reinvested back in K-12 education. And this, again, as I mentioned, was the first year we've not requested additional funding. I will tell you that if we do see some additional funding come through the state budget, then we would move that into additional compensation. We just don't know if we'll see any. And that is my shortened version of a much longer presentation.
All right. I know the school board's had an opportunity to talk to you about it as council. Do you have any specific questions? The only one I had was on the discussion on preschool. Is that still that's not, the total addition of students is not from preschool only?
No,
enrollment?
it's not. The preschool actually is not counted in for state funding. We do receive a state grant that supports our preschool program, and then we also receive some tuition from parents who choose to put their students in the preschool program. So our state funding is from our regular categorized state funding is K through 12. So no, that increase in enrollment, actually, the 36 doesn't include preschool, but all those jumps that I highlighted in that other one does. So yeah, no.
So truly, it appears that we've turned the trend.
Yes.
We've hit the bottom of the trough on students. So that's a good news story.
Yes.
And I know that we've been all trying as a group, the three committees, basically, council, school board, and the planning committee have all been focused on increasing growth to help turn that trend. So that appears to have paid off. So if there's no other questions, Gary, what have you got for us? Or would you like your board to go through and tell us their thoughts?
Well, the first thing I would say is the only thing nicer than not having to find more funding for the school system is not having to come to you and ask for it. So that has been it's just been very nice this year to actually be funded for a change instead of having to pick and choose and cut more and more. But hats off to Dr. Parrish and her staff over the years for being creative in ways to find the funding and to cut, and being prudent in how that money is spent. So I appreciate their work, but also just appreciate City Council's support and willingness to do what needs to be done to help us function at the highest level possible, given the funding that we have. So really appreciate that, especially the funding for the middle school project and our capital improvements. So thank you all very, very much for that.
Okay. Any other members of the school board, y'all have any comments that you'd like to share with us? Oh, it's a quiet meeting. It is true, and council's very appreciative of the operating budget. We're appreciative of the state's seems to have turned a corner, but they're not there all the way yet, but they seem to have turned a corner. We're glad to hear about enrollment. We're glad to hear that your operational budget is not requiring us to pitch into it, and we hope that that trend will be close, in the future, because while this is really a good news story for the school's budget, we have our plate full. Our plate is very full with this school. I want to call it the school bond, because I'll be quite honest with you, we wouldn't be talking about a financing move if it wasn't for the school. Now, we realize that some of the things will take place on the city side, but the vast majority is for the schools. It is a chunk of money, and it is an important chunk of money. So appreciate all the efforts to get us to which school, where, because I know a lot of subcommittees have been meeting all the way back into the fall, and I think we've got all the answers. I think we worked well together as a school board council team to say this is what we need, this is where we need it, and the council has put with our bond council how to do it and how to pay for it. But it's still a churn on us, and probably the heaviest thing on our minds as we proceed forward. But very good news about the normal operating budget, and we appreciate it. And Dr. Parrish, we appreciate what you do along with Randy, because what we know is that what both boards are blessed by your constant communication and ability to work with each other. So many cities don't get that, and they fight it this time. And if I can run a work session in 15 minutes with my school board on their budget, I'm thinking that that's an A. So unless there's anything else, I'll let y'all get on to dinner, and we can get on with our budget. So we appreciate your time.
That's right. That's exactly.
All right. Yeah, we're still in. Your mics are hot. All right. Are we ready?
Thank you, I appreciate the wait.
Pop the other slide up. Okay, we're just waiting on the PowerPoint. The extensive PowerPoint is ready to go?
Okay. So we're going to switch over here, and we're going to talk about the city budget, the real meat and potatoes. There's a lot of moving parts in the city budget this year. Most of those moving parts, I believe, are associated with the recapitalization of the schools. I want to call it that way. And the bond that we're considering moving forward with, and we've met with our bond council the previous meeting. I want to highlight for the citizens that I think I've only gotten one question on the budget, and that was the question of you know, why 6 cents now when you're not doing it. And what we quickly have realized as a council with our bond council is that if you pay for it up front, the tax implication of this is less overall. So basically, one thing that we definitely want to talk about. Okay. So with that said, Randy, I'll let you lead on through your budget.
Okay, Mr. Mayor, members of council, at the beginning of this work session that we have prior to the public hearing, we typically begin it with a short rundown of sort of what has changed. And bear with me here. Mr. Canelo, got the clicker. There are, well, we borrowed it. There have been, all right.
Turn that one off and switch to this one, please.
All right, Bob says the audio's not working too good. Okay, thank you. There have been no significant changes since the budget was put out. That is unusual for us. Oftentimes we get revenue enhancements or revisions based on the state budget and some of the agencies that we work with that also have state budget components. But in the absence of a state budget, there are no significant changes to the budget that are kind of the form of housekeeping types of changes. As the superintendent spoke to, there is not at this time an approved state budget for next year. Also, what they call the caboose bill, which is the amended budget for the current fiscal year, is also caught up in the same process. Unlike previous years where it appeared that the issues at hand in the state budget would have a direct impact on us and potentially either a very positive one or sometimes a negative one, at least as we understand the budget in its current format, there don't seem to be any major changes our way. One of the things that we did talk about today at the Peninsula Mayors and Chairs meeting, though, was should the Medicare expansion be approved in the state budget, that may impact short-term and longer-term the staffing requirements of the Department of Social Services, which we do have a funding part of. So there may be something down the road that we can't quantify yet. But other than that, as far as I know, unless things take a drastic change, there are no significant changes that will directly impact us in the state budget. We did have a couple of questions. I'll just take a moment to highlight it. As you'll recall from the work session where we presented the budget, we talked about two new component fees of the EMS Revenue Recovery Program. One of those was for refusals. Got some questions as to what does that mean. A refusal is when we have EMS personnel dispatch and they believe, in their opinion, after working and treating the person, that they medically do need to go to the hospital. If at that point the patient refuses, then that's counted as a deferral. If we're simply there to assist them on a medical assist or something like that that doesn't require transport, this fee does not apply to that. So that answer seemed to clarify the point for the folks that at least were asking the question. Not to get into this too much this evening, but know that before you next week and potentially the week after that, you all will be making some decisions on how you'd like to move forward with the recommendations of the School Safety Committee. Whatever the recommendations are that the City Council ultimately endorses, we will bring you in work session prior to the scheduled budget adoption, a plan or potentially a couple of variants to advance that. So we're still sitting there at this point with the placeholders in the budget, but after you all have had a chance to express your consensus on the issue, we'll turn that into a budget plan. And lastly, just want to thank Councilman Cannella for prodding us to go find a clicker we could borrow. And that really is all the things at a staff level that we have for you. We're here, of course, to answer any questions that you may have, but that sort of concludes our preset portion of the work session.
So, council, what's your, what do you want to talk about? I think from my perspective, I'm satisfied with the budget that we've got before us, but I'm open to a discussion.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
Can I just ask just an informational question? So the school contribution portion, the 9.9 million that we contribute, that's, it's the locality's contribution. Do they start with that number the next year and try to work? How is that number determined, just for information purposes, that starting point for the local amount?
Randy, you want to handle that?
Yeah,
Or you want me to tell them what I think? I think they start with that number.
I think, Sanders, they start with that number. That doesn't mean they need to stay with it.
Right.
It's sort of the starting point from which they determine whether they need more or less.
Okay.
It's not a guaranteed lock in that respect. And, as the superintendent referenced years ago, we were actually going backwards as the recession was pulling us all backwards. But that's the point with which they start.
From the previous year's
Yes, ma'am.
number? Okay, that's what I thought. I probably should have asked that during the session, but I didn't think about it till just now.
Okay. Anything else? All right. All right, so just highlighting what's in the budget, okay? For the citizens at home that this may be the first time they're hearing about it. The proposed tax rates that we have to fund the budget, which includes a major improvement on, and really the real driving factor behind the increase, is $1.14 per hundred value. That's what's proposed in front of us as the manager's recommended budget. Personal property tax will remain unchanged. Fees largely, including trash, sewer, are all unchanged. The only changes are to some parks and rec fees, I believe, and what Randy talked about on the EMS billing. Other than that, it is a straight budget. Where did you find, because it was an interesting point, and I know there's changing demographics in the school as far as who's in the plan now, but as far as health insurance, we're going through changing demographics ourselves. Is there any break in what we're doing as far as health insurance and the like?
As you may recall, in the current fiscal year, we actually saw our health insurance amount go down. We had a similar experience to the schools. So this year, let me get to that number, we are looking at projecting an overall 5% increase, which, you never want to have an increase, but if you're going to have one, 5%, it's a whole lot less than what we would traditionally expect. So in the current year, we saw a decrease. And more often than not, in the past several years, we've either seen a decrease or no significant increase at all. We are also at this time studying options that we may be able to move towards with the next budget, going slow to make sure we understand things like the health savings accounts and other high deductible plan options that may be out there we don't currently offer. So it is a work in progress for us, but the current year is a 5% projected increase.
Okay. And are there any raises? I believe there are. There are raises in here for our employees. Is that correct?
Yes, sir. You recall from the previous work session, I sort of went through each of the 7 strategic areas of the budget, but one of those was the recommendation for a 2% pay increase for all of our full-time employees. That was made possible in part, as I said, by the schools not needing any additional operating support from us. Once the VRS increased, well, the schools saw a decrease, we saw an increase of 16%. Couple that with a 5% health insurance, and pretty quickly, the amount of money that's available in the natural budget, meaning a budget with stable tax rates, is pretty tight at that point. So in addition to making sure that the base budgets continue to support the mission, that was really the next and last thing. There are some new positions requested in the budget outside of the school safety initiative, but to live within the constraints of the basic budget, there are no new positions recommended in the budget. There are no new initiatives in the budget, with the exception of the 2% pay increase, if you want to call that an initiative, and the 2 separate ones that are supported by recommended tax increases, the debt funding at 6 cents and the support of the school safety committee and its recommendations at 1 cent.
Okay. I just wanted to point those out to those that might be listening at home, and if there's no other questions, I'm willing to move forward to public hearing. Okay. All right, close the work session. Thank you all for attending this evening, and we'll move forward to the regular meeting here in about 30 minutes. Thanks.